In this Last Epoch Runemaster Build guide, we're going to be covering a Runemaster build that focuses on the rapid casting of a converted Frostclaw to fire, while passively debuffing enemies and dealing extra damage with Frostwall as a Runic Invocation. I'll explain how to get the most from this build both as a beginner and what works great for the end game. So if you've been looking for a Runemaster build, one with much less hassle, then this Runemaster build guide is for you. Before we get into the video, however, a big shout out to 11th Hour Games for sponsoring this video. If you guys are picking up Last Epoch this week at full launch of the game, you can use our link below to support the channel. Fireclaw is a converted version of the Frostclaw skill, which comes from the base mage class. The skill has easy access to extra base crit chance nodes, so it plays well as a crit-focused build. The Runemaster is a class that brings very good survivability and mana sustain, so we can go very aggressive with Frostclaw nodes and deal great damage and gain ward. With Frostwall converted to fire, you can apply a lot of fire resistance shred to enemies. Moreover, with Runic Invocation on your skill bar, you gain raw runes while casting Frostclaw. Raw runes help with mana generation and give you access to very good damage invocations. Invocations can increase the damage capability of this Runemaster build, but we don't rely on them a whole lot. This build gets a large effective health pool by staying low on health and stacking wards from so many sources. This synergizes well with the intelligence stat that scales ward retention, but also damage, critical, and cooldown recovery speed. Staying at low health makes the endurance stat more impactful in mitigating damage, as 100% of the hits you take will be reduced by the endurance multiplier. This Runemaster build can spam Frostclaw as much as you need. It has no cooldown and initially has a very low mana cost that may go down to 0. In later stages of progression, you may spec into nodes that increase both AoE and single target DPS. This comes at the cost of using more mana, so we have to build our mana generation first before going down this route. While clearing the Monolith of Fate, the goal is to run as fast as possible to reach the destination while clearing mobs so we can cast Frostwall ahead of us and run through it to gain speed and damage bonuses. We also have access to one of the best movement skills in the game, Flame Rush. Between these two skills, we move very quickly between packs of enemies. We can also spam Frostclaw throughout the whole process. Frostclaw has two notable properties that affect gameplay. First, you can stagger cast your Frostclaw so you don't stop moving. This is achieved by holding down the movement key or the joystick on your controller and holding the Frostclaw assigned key in small bursts. Therefore, you can cast a couple of times, move a small distance, then rinse and repeat. Secondly, Frostclaw takes time to reach enemies, so you may be able to adopt a cast and move tactic even before enemies die. Predicting the right amount of cast you need to perform in order to kill enemies may vary between different modes. However, each Monolith of Fate has consistent packs of enemies with similar HP, so the kill speed remains mostly the same in each one. This saves a lot of time and allows players to progress faster. In this section, we'll take a look at what skills should be on your skill bar to make this Runemaster build work. Not all 5 skills in this build are mandatory, and some can be replaced in some situations. We will pick skills from the base mage class and the Runemaster class. First up is obviously Frostclaw. This is a base skill from the mage tree that unlocks at character level 12. So before level 12, you may use any of the starter spells such as Fireball or Lightning Blast and then respec it later. As soon as you specialize in Frostclaw, you should start with 3 of 3 Gift of Winter, which reduces mana cost. With this and a reduced mana cost of spells on your wand, Frostclaw's mana cost gets down to 3 mana per cast. This, with a 36% chance to regain 12 mana and natural mana regeneration, enables an infinite spam of Frostclaw. We move to damage modifiers next, with 4 of 4 Rending Cascade for additional crit chance, then 1 to 3 of Fen of the Frozen to get the nodes behind it, and then we allocate 1 of 3 Bright Frost to cast faster and cleanse ailments and debuffs from yourself. Then proceed to 1 of 1 Hand of Mortitis, which adds additional projectiles to Frostclaw. So far, having done those things, the cost of Frostclaw should still be around 5 mana per cast and can be countered by mana generation. The element of this skill should still be cold damage, which can chill and freeze enemies. This is very helpful in the early game. However, to transition into mid-game, we adapted to a Fireclaw build to capitalize on Ignite and fire-resistant shred from Frostwall. So take 1 of 1 Lava Talon, converting its damage type to fire, and turning its chill chance into Ignite chance. Now take 1 of 1 Volley of Glass and 5 of 5 Spark of Celerity. Volley of Glass allows all projectiles to hit the same target, doing great damage at the cost of consuming more mana. Spark of Celerity reduces the mana cost, so it stays manageable. It may also take 1 of 1 Frozen Rain to reduce mana cost even further. For the final form of this tree, we aim to increase damage potential, so we get 1 of 3 Glamdring and 1 of 3 Cold Star. This takes the total points spent to 20 points, which is the maximum without modifiers. However, you should be able to manage to get +2 to Frostclaw from the modifier on the relic slot. This enables us to take 1 of 1 on Through the Snow, adding a whole extra cast from the target location. This extra cast hits the same target as the first cast, so it effectively doubles the damage an enemy takes. However, the mana cost peaks at this point and it starts draining your mana pool rapidly, so you should invest heavily in mana regeneration and spec another spell to regain mana fast. I recommend Runebolt for this purpose. You can get 3 of 3 Cold Star for maximum damage. This will need to either get an extra +1 to Frostclaw level or respec any other node, like reduce Spark of Celerity to 4 of 5 instead. You may also get 1 of 1 Frozen Malice to have the second cast of Fireclaw aim at the enemies, which gives you much more comfort in clearing areas. The next skill is Runic Invocation. This spell unlocks upon picking a Runemaster Mastery, which is around character level 16 to 18. It's the signature skill of the Runemaster that allows the character to passively gain runes of 3 different types depending on the element of spells directly cast. Fire spells grant the Ra rune, cold spells grant the Heo rune, and lightning gives the Gon rune. Depending on these types of runes, you gain different passive bonuses and are allowed to cast different spells with Runic Invocation. There are a total of 40 different combinations that equal 40 different spells. However, in our Fireclaw Runemaster build, we don't focus on actively casting Runic Invocation. The reason being is that most spells it can cast have limited scaling at endgame and are complicated to set up, so we focus on passive bonuses instead. So we'll start with 1 of 4 attuned approach for opening the path to the lower half of the skill tree where we spend most of our points. 3 of 3 inscribed patterns gives passive bonuses based on the rune types you have. Each Ra rune, fire type, grants 2% mana generation for a total of 6% at 3 runes. Gon runes or lightning grant 12 wards per second for a total of 36 wards per second on 3 runes. Then Heo runes, cold, give you a freeze rate multiplier. So the final form of this build gains 6% mana generation from this rune. This is helpful to sustain the spam of Frostclaw. Get 3 of 5 or 4 of 5 in Runic Energy to accumulate energy stacks passively while not casting Runic Invocation. Then allocate 4 of 4 copied scrolls for a 10% chance per 1 energy to double cast Runic Invocation. Finally, finish this branch with 1 of 1 Arcane Battery to triple the maximum energy. These 3 nodes combined allow energy to stack up to 27, 36, or 45, which grants 270, 360, or 450% chance to repeat respectively depending on the level of Runic Energy. This makes Runic Invocation repeat 2 times for each cast, even with a small number of energy stacks. The duplicated effect is a nice way to get some burst damage against bosses once in a while. As you may have noticed while trying to cast any invocation, it costs a lot of mana and hinders the spam of Frostclaw. So we take away the mana cost entirely by taking 1 of 1 Author of Arcana. This gives the skill a 12-second cooldown, damage bonus, and fully refunds mana upon cast. We pair this with 4 of 4 Adept Runescribing to reduce cooldown. Then wrap up the skill tree with 3 of 4 or 4 of 4 in Transcriber of Power. Trying to pick the best invocation and accurately cast it is a lot of hassle, but also an exciting part of playing a Runemaster. Luckily for us, there's a simplified way to get the exact runes you need, regardless of the elements you cast. This is done with the 1 of 1 Immutable Order node, which bases the runes you gain on the element of the first 3 skills of the skill bar. So we pick the node, switch the element of some skills, and place them on the skill bar in the correct order. However, this removes the flexibility of manually picking an invocation and locks you into a specific one. An important part of picking runes is the passive they grant. The first passive of note is the mana generation from having raw runes with inscribed patterns allocated. But there are other passives from the passive tree, such as the doubling effects of the Decree of Burning Wind from the raw rune, which gives more damage against bosses. Doubling the effects of the Decree of the Eternal Tundra with Heo runes for more wards per second, as well as doubling the Decree of Bountiful Ocean with Gon runes for massive mana regeneration. For our Fireclaw Runemaster build, I recommend one of these 3. Plasma Orb, Ra, Gon Ra, or Fire, Lightning, Fire. This casts Lightning and Fireball to orbit your character, dealing several hits to all enemies around you. It increases AoE and helps to clear massive waves of monsters around you. This invocation lasts for a few seconds, so it allows higher uptime to compensate for Runic Invocation cooldown. 2 raw runes generate 4% mana regeneration, and the Gon runes add 18% more mana regeneration from Decree of Bountiful Ocean. You can get this invocation by placing your Frostclaw converted to fire first on the skill bar, followed by Flame Rush converted to lightning, and finally Frostwall converted to fire. Next is Hydra Hadron, which is Gon Ra Ra or Lightning Fire Fire. It's similar to the previous combo with the exact same runes but in a different order. Just choose Flame Rush first and then follow it up with Frostclaw and Frostwall. This invocation summons a gushing flame that shoots projectiles at enemies for a duration. The flames auto-aim, but the source of them is stationary, so it's more suited for bosses rather than AoE clearing. And lastly is Winds of Eos, which is Ra Heo Ra or Fire Cold Fire. Adding the Heo rune instead of Gone gives more survivability via ward gain from Decree of the Eternal Tundra. The invocation itself gives the Frenzy buff for 4 seconds, which gives a massive 20% cast speed. This is universal buff that increases clear speed, boss killing speed, and war gain speed, but naturally consumes more mana. Note that this is not the only source of Frenzy in this Fireclaw build, and if you're willing to fully optimize it, you have to cycle through these buffs for more uptime. Set up your skill bar with Frostclaw converted to fire first on the skill bar, followed by Flame Rush converted to cold, and Frostwall converted to fire if you wish to use this one. The next skill we'll be covering is Flame Rush. This spell unlocks after spending 5 passive points in the Runemaster class tree, so you may get it around levels 23 to 25, which is still fairly early in the game. Flame Rush is a movement spell that teleports the player a short distance and causes a fire explosion on arrival. If you hold down the key, the spell channels for longer. It also increases the travel distance and deals more damage. We give this spell more modifiers to make the character tanky and use it as a tool for survival, not only movement. You'll convert the spell element depending on which invocation you want to use, as we just explained. Start with 3 of 3 Blazing Flux for mana efficiency and cooldown recovery. Next is 2 of 3 or 3 of 3 on Runic Eclipse to reduce the damage taken while you channel Flame Rush. This buff can be helpful against some massive boss hits, especially with the next node, 3 of 3 Celestial Guidance. This node enables buffs to persist a bit after you finish casting. Then take 3 of 3 Lunar Protection for more wards per second and Ward Burst after you finished casting. If you need to convert Flame Rush to Lightning, you'll need to take 1 of 1 energy equivalents, and if you need Cold, take the 1 of 1 Snowballing as well. Now take 2 of 2 Fiery Overlord for the Frenzy buff. Then you're left with 4 to 7 points you're free to spend wherever you prefer. I prefer picking 1 of 1 Ember Wake and 3 of 3 Solar Rush. You may opt to auto-cast Runic Invocation after Flame Rush by picking up 1 of 1 Epilogue. However, this node doesn't refund the mana of Runic Invocation and will drain your mana rapidly, causing a sustainability issue. Only take this one if you know exactly what you're doing. Next is Frostwall. Frostwall unlocks at 15 points in the Runemaster tree and goes a long way in helping this build. This spell casts a wall on the target location. The location would be wherever the mouse pointer is with keyboard and mouse, or right on the enemy's head if you use a controller. This is very useful in applying certain debuffs to help us clear both AoE content and bosses. The wall element can be converted into fire through nodes or through an affix on Grand Idols. The conversion comes with very rewarding bonuses. The wall also gives more bonuses when you pass through it, so keep that in mind. For this build, we aim to convert all our damage, buffs, and debuffs to fire. So we pick 1 of 5 Marching Winter, 1 of 1 Pyroglass, and 1 of 1 Brand of the Invader. These 3 nodes ensure conversion to the fire element and changing Frostbite chance into fire resistant shred chance. Next, we go get more Frostbite chance to enhance the fire shred through the 4 of 4 biting limit. 1 of 4 Protection of the Apostate and 1 of 1 Shelter of the Chef is next, which gives an easy way to accumulate ward. In crowded areas, casting Frostwall will give a very nice burst of ward to help you survive more incoming damage. Now we get more ward and haste. Pick 2 of 4 Crystals of Protection and 3 of 3 Boosted Kickoff. We don't pick prepared wards because it adds a huge cooldown to Frostwall, which hinders the build. You also gain Frenzy and haste buffs for a duration matching the duration of the wall before you pass through. 1 on 1 Wall of Glyptic Art enables Frostwall to auto-cast Rune Bolt, which could be used to gain more benefits and deal some damage. Then Arcane Mosaic increases the Rune Bolt frequency depending on how many points you spend here. Put the rest of your points here up to 3 of 5, 4 of 5, or 5 of 5. And the last skill for this build is Rune Bolt. This spell unlocks after spending 35 points in Runemaster, so it will be the last spell you specialize in this build. It's another spammable spell similar to Frostclaw, but alternates between 3 versions: Lightning Bolt, Firebolt, and Cold Bolt. Each element has slightly different properties. We can't spam both Rune Bolt and Frostclaw. With Frostclaw having higher damage potential, I usually switch up the Rune Bolt to a utility skill. Pick 4 of 4 Arcane Restoration for a 100% chance to gain 12 mana per cast. Then 3 of 3 Rune Weaver for extra mana regeneration and mana gained as a ward. To gain more mana from Rune Bolt, pick 2 of 5 Arcane Overcharge and 3 of 3 Attuned Recovery. Attuned Recovery is a node that grants bonuses based on the rune type. So if you don't change the rune types for Rune Bolt, it will keep cycling through the 3 elements, granting different and smaller buffs. Cold grants mana, Lightning grants ward, and Fire grants health. I find health to be bothersome and counterproductive in pure ward builds, so I intend to change the Rune Bolt. Take 3 of 4 or 4 of 4 in Arcanist for the haste buff, and then 1 of 3 in Cryomantic Bolt, and 1 of 1 in Ice Shard, and 1 of 1 in Frostbite. This changes both fire and lightning into cold and enables Rune Bolt to rapidly fill our mana when we cast it. It turns the spell into an emergency tool that reduces the downtime of our Fireclaw build. You may also put 1 of 1 in Runic Evocation for auto aim and 1 of 1 in Efficient Experiment for a 20% chance to double cast. Figuring out how to spend your points in the passive tree is one of the most important parts of making a build in Last Epoch, and generally it takes a respec or two before getting it right. In this section, I want to show you how I've set this up for maximum performance. The Mage base tree is where you start by default and will need to spend 20 points to unlock the specialization trees later. So put 8 of 8 into the Arcanist node for intelligence, fire resistance, and lightning resistance. Note that intelligence is one of our most desired stats overall. It naturally scales all of our spell damage and ward retention, but with certain nodes in the Runemaster tree also scales crit chance and cooldown. Put 1 of 8 in Elementalist and 1 of 8 in Scholar, then jump to 5 or 6 points in Arcane Flames. This enables any hit to ignite surrounding enemies and gives fire hits a 5% damage multiplier, and finally finish with 5 of 10 Knowledge of Destruction for an extra crit multiplier on hits. Once you reach the end of time and get to master the Runemaster class, you'll start investing in this tree. We'll spend a lot of our points here and we'll find very good stats. 5 of 6 unsealed mana is where we should start for mana and cast speed. Plus, there is a bonus for 5 points that gives a burst of mana and ward. This bonus is hard to get from Frostclaw as it needs 0 cost spells, so we only get it when using Runebolt. It makes Runebolt double down on mana generation, so it's all good. Take 8 of 8 Arcane Focus for more intelligence and ward per spell cast, and 6 of 6 Runeward Cataclysm for crit chance. Runeward Cataclysm has a 5-point bonus that gives a straight 15% damage multiplier to enemies below 35% health. Then we get more ward and health from 6 of 6 Transcendence. 6 of 6 Edict of the Scion is the biggest source of wards in our build so far, and it grants 36 wards per rune per area skill cast. Frostclaw is an area skill, and the high cooldown of Runic Invocation allows us to have 3 runes for almost 100% of the time. So this way, every cast of Frostclaw is done with 3 runes, and grants a whopping 108 wards. We can cast Frostclaw multiple times per second, depending on the cast speed. Now get 6 of 6 Inscribed Instruments for crit multiplier if you use a wand, and 8 of 8 Decree of the Eternal Tundra for more wards per second. Then get 10 of 10 in Ancient Inscriptions for intelligence and cooldown. Then go for 6 of 8 Cerulean Runestones for mana and endurance. You may delay in getting these last 2 passives, prioritize 4 of 5 Jagged Veil first, since it grants ward and damage. You can also choose 1 of 5 Runeward Inferno for a chance to get flat fire damage. There are a lot of other good nodes in the Runemaster tree, but we get even more potent ones from some of the Sorcerer tree, and this is the time to grab those. 8 of 8 Calculated Destruction is a source of intelligence, and crit chance is based on total intelligence. If you manage to get 80 intelligence, for example, this node gives 240% increase to crit chance. This helps Frostclaw get a near guaranteed crit. Next, get 5 of 5 Arcane Momentum and 8 of 8 Essence of Celerity for a 25% cast speed and 80% spell damage and 10% movement speed. Finally, we have a choice for the last 6 points if we reach level 100. We may grab a 1 of 5 in Pyromancer and 5 of 5 in Lavamancer in the Sorcerer tree for fire penetration, but at the cost of gaining health, which reduces ward generation. Another option is putting them in the base Mage tree to get Knowledge of Destruction to 10 of 10. This is a decent option, but risks overcapping crit chance. Finally, the last option is to put them anywhere in the Runemaster tree. This could go into Celestial Doom to get a bit more damage in general and to gain a damage multiplier against branded bosses. We can apply Brand from Frostwall, but it's not easy against highly mobile bosses. In this section, we'll be covering the type of equipment that you want to aim for this Runemaster build and what stats you need on them. The first thing you want is a good weapon that ideally gives nice stats. The best stat for this build is increased fire damage, as it gets to increase both direct spell hits and ignite damage, as well as increased spell crit chance. For this reason, the best weapon to use in our build is the Wand and Catalyst. There are several good base weapons to craft. Before level 60, use any wand with the high base spell and good substats. After level 60, use Crystal Wand. It has a high base and a nice mana boost. At level 77, there is the Dragonhorn Wand as an option, and it gives cast speed instead of mana. You can settle on any base and aim to craft the best substats possible. For Wand, there are no great suffixes to roll, so we focus mainly on maximizing the output from the prefixes. The following prefixes are in order from highest damage impact to lowest. Cast speed, increased fire damage, spell crit strike chance, spell damage, critical strike multiplier, critical strike chance. You can't get more than 2 prefixes, so we try to get the top 2 and max them to tier 5. However, if you do get an exalted item that's tier 6 or 7, you can use prefixes from the lower damage ones, and they're still likely more viable than if you had a T5 of the higher ones. The best stats we may get from the offhand are the ward-related stats. There's one catalyst that has 2 ward stats. Opulent Focus, which is a level plus 54 catalyst with massive ward retention, ward per second, and intelligence. Note that other catalysts with mana gained as ward is weaker because ward retention is much more impactful. Offhand, Catalyst can roll most stats similar to Wand, so you can get cast speed, crit and spell crit, fire damage, and spell damage, so use the same logic for prefixes here. On suffixes, however, Catalysts roll an extra modifier, which are resistances and ward per second, so make sure to get these. For armor stats, we have the following priorities at endgame. For suffixes, health, endurance, resistance, ward per second on helmet, and chance to apply frailty on hit on relic or gloves. Prefixes are intelligence, spell crit chance on amulet or relic, crit strike multiplier on amulet or relic, plus levels to skills that come with elemental damage or spell damage like Frostclaw or Runic Invocation, increased cast speed on gloves or relic, fire penetration on amulet, mana regeneration on rings, belt, or amulet, and increased fire damage on belt and rings. That covers most stats you need for this build, leaving only a few ones to pick up from other sources. For example, mana gained as ward comes from some items' bases, such as the Ruined Visage Helmet base, the Warding Scroll Relic base, and Arcane Boots base. Or can be gained from unique items such as the Strands of Souls unique belt and Last Steps of the Living unique boots. For other bases, you may use Noble Gloves for cast speed, Bronze Belt for armor, and Ruby Ring for fire damage increase. As for Amulet, I prefer using Oracle Amulet for damage reduction on dots. There are more potent modifiers that can only be gained from idols. For example, we need mana efficiency and elemental penetration for Frostclaw, which comes from ornate idols. That's why I prefer using the following setup: 2 ornate idols, 2 grand idols, 1 large idol, and 3 small idols. You can get the following unique stats from idols, so pick idols that have 1 prefix and 1 suffix from the list. You can see what these are for each type of idol on screen now. Final thoughts. This Last Epoch Fireclaw Runemaster build is an easy build to fulfill most offensive and defensive requirements for a farming build. It can kill bosses as well as clear intense waves of enemies. It can do most monolith mods without issue. This build has huge effective hit points and can even survive some one-shot mechanics. When the ward range becomes low, it will suddenly gain a huge increase in ward, so it's harder to die from several small hits than it is one large hit. This build does not rely a lot on unique items besides a couple of ones that are not hard to get, so it can work as a starter build. You can use this build with hit and run tactics, or you can stand your ground by casting infinitely, making this build quite versatile. For me, it's the most stable build I've played yet, while still being fun and effective. So that wraps up our Runemaster Fireclaw build. I hope you guys got something out of it. I hope we explained it well. It's a very good build for both new players and veterans of the game. And once again, big shout out to Last Epoch for sponsoring this video. If you guys are considering picking up the game, use our link below to support the channel.